Yo, what is up?
Yeah, not much. What's up with you?
Oh, nothing. Just relaxing. Just listening to most of your discography to get in the mood for this interview.
Oh, okay, great. Now, where are you calling from? Where are you, Jordan?
New York.
Oh, you are in New York. Okay, good. Cool.
Yep. All right. Question one. What
Okay.
is what is the story behind your name Monday?
I'm born on Monday. My last name, which was going to be Mariano because that was my father's last name, may he rest in peace, was Mariano. So it was obvious that to my mother, like, wow, she's born on Monday. Let's do the Monday. So she was the one who decided to call me Monday.
Amazing story and very unique name. Question two. What was your upbringing like?
What was my upbringing like? Let me see. Well, my parents are jazz musicians. So the house and the environment that I grew up in was always filled with music, mostly jazz driven, but also classical music. I grew up a little bit in Japan and also Los Angeles and New York, and it was good. It was interesting. But in my era, being half Japanese and half Italian American was unusual, so people didn't know quite what to make of me. So it was definitely always a sense of treatment of being the other, and so I always felt like I had to accommodate people and sort of like find common ground with people, and that probably made me a more well-rounded person as a result.
A great answer, and I like that sense of character you have.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome. Question three. When and how did you learn English since you were born in Japan?
Well, I grew up a lot in America. So from the age of 1 to 3, I was here, which is the years that you start to learn language. So English was actually my first language until I moved back to Japan from 3 to 7, forgot all my English. Then when I moved back to the States at age 7, I had to relearn from the beginning. But yeah, I would consider actually English to be my native language.
Great answer. Question four. When and how were you bitten by the music bug?
When I was born, probably in my mother's womb, because them being musicians, I was hearing the vibrations of music from before I was born.
Great answer. Question five. What artists of or genres shaped your music taste?
What genre or well, I really everything. I mean, from again, what I said, the environment at home being jazz and classical, but then my era of music, which is largely the 70s and 80s, we were listening to anything from soul to what was considered popular music growing up was a combination of soul, and you had disco, and you had fusion, and you had the beginnings of pop. You had new wave, you had punk, you had rock, and all of that, reggae, of course. Everything was just sort of a mishmash and up for grabs. So everything influenced me. It was less about the genre that influenced me. It was more about the artists and the uniqueness of them, or just something that would strike me about them as being really cool or really interesting and something I could relate to.
Yes, I definitely agree with you there because even though I wasn't born in that era, listening to that kind of music from the 70s and 80s still holds up and stands the test of time because of how original and how much work went into it.
Absolutely. The production was fantastic. Musicianship was really great. Yeah.
I I agree with you there. Question five. Who influenced your style of singing?
Who influenced my style of singing? That's a hard one because I don't know, to be honest. It's just, I can't, you know, I think you could hear certain artists and say, oh, they sound like so and so, right? And
Yeah.
so I really didn't try to sound like somebody. I would admire people like Chaka Khan, but my voice is not like Chaka Khan. I would admire Flora Purim, but my voice is, maybe a little more like her, but not much. There's a lot of singers that I admired, but I don't sound like them. And I recognize that. I recognize that I have a different voice, tone, so I don't really know how I got eventually my sound.
That's great answer because that's a great way to develop as an artist, like singing covers and taking music lessons, and then you start to feel comfortable with your own voice.
Probably. Yeah. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm never comfortable with my voice, to be honest with you.
I I like your speaking voice.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Up question 6. Tell me about your dance background.
So by dance background, do you mean me as a dancer or me doing dance music?
Um, I would say both. Let's go with you as a dancer first, and then segue into dance music.
Okay. So I actually was given ballet lessons when I was young. My mother gave me the choice of either doing ballet or taking piano lessons. And I thought, oh, I'm not doing piano lessons because she's the pianist. And I was too scared of her. So I thought I'll take ballet. So I took that for like maybe altogether 5 years or so. And when you learn to dance, you learn to move your body. And me coming from a music background, music obviously would affect me, and I would want to move my body to it. So then that sort of segued into suddenly here I am in my teens, and disco was big, and you start to notice guys and girls and whatever, wherever your preference is. And suddenly the whole idea of being at a party and dancing was like, how do I move? I only know how to do ballet. What do I do? And then I just started moving, and I don't know, just got into it. So that's that. And then once I got the bug of like, man, dance music is actually pretty cool. Again, even though disco was my era, I didn't really think disco was all that great. Later, I started to appreciate it much, much more in my 30s, maybe. But I thought disco was a little corny. Sorry. I was more into funk and more into soul. So that was what sort of struck me more as the cooler things to do. And that naturally evolved into I loved hip hop, and that evolved into I thought new wave was interesting and quirky, and what is that about? Very unique. And then once, like in the late 80s, I started to hear jazz influences coming into soul as well as hip hop. I was like, okay, now we're talking. This is sort of like my language that I can understand. So yeah, I always had my ear to the ground. I always had a great appreciation for, it's not just about dance music. I liked subculture, like anything to do with something that's not mainstream, something that's a subculture that is not of the norm, that you really have to dig deep to find these artists and find these producers, and then the curiosity, around that was really my interest in dance music.
Great answer, and I could relate to the whole dancing thing because I may have not taken any lessons, but I never shy away of getting down when I hear my favorite song or at a party because I always bust out the Running Man, the
Okay.
Prep, the Raise the Roof, and the Carlton.
Okay. All right. Good.
Great answer. Question 7. When did you start recording professionally?
My first professional recording was when I was actually 13 years old. I was asked by my mother to sing on one of her albums, and I did. And then the next one was, I think I was 16, and my flute playing had elevated to a point that my mom thought, all right, let's do a flute album. So we did a whole flute album, and I got to play one of the flute parts, and that was like a big joy for me. And then from there, I started to develop more as an artist myself, writing my own songs and stuff. And probably the first recording of that was maybe gosh, in uh, I want to say maybe 1991 was my very first release as
Um,
a as an artist of my own name. Yeah.
Incredible story. Like, yeah, I bet you were a lucky teenager because most teenagers always dream of stardom.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. I think there's a fallacy in the idea that people who get into music or seem to be in the forefront want to do it for the stardom. And I won't dispute the fact that maybe some do, they really do want to do that. But there's people like myself who, I'll be honest with you, if I could get away with not being the front person, I would be happy to just write music, make music, record music, everything but being in front and everything that entails. I never really thought about stardom. I always thought about the communication factor behind music because music is communication. It's another language. You know, if it makes you move, that's a communication right there. If I can write something that another musician's like, yeah, how about I do this around that? All that is communication. And then I've eventually learned to embrace being in front of an audience because that's a communication with the audience. So for me, it's really not about stardom at all.
Great answer. But yeah, like not everyone likes or is fit to be the lead person. So when they play a supporting role, they take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question 8. How did you get into the whole acid jazz scene?
So I think we touched on the fact that I was starting to hear jazz influences coming into like hip hop and soul and other musics actually. And I really thought that that was very cool, something I could recognize and identify with. So that was really sort of like the beginnings of acid jazz. They were starting to bring elements of that, and jazz at that point was maybe starting to feel like a old people's music and a little irrelevant compared to the more popular musics of that time. So for me to hear jazz starting to come back was great. So yeah, that's why I got into acid jazz.
A great answer. But yeah, like Jamiroquai made it popular in Europe and then it crossed over into the United States and Japan.
Well, actually, in Japan, we were hip to acid jazz way before Jamiroquai came out. Yeah, we were, I think, ahead of the curve on that one. Jamiroquai, don't get me wrong, he's a great, wonderful singer, songwriter, dancer. He's got some moves right on him,
Yeah,
and that
yeah, amazing
ad-lib.
performer.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, question 9. Walk me through your process when you're in the studio. Say working on your own music or just being a singer in general.
Right. So by the time I hit the studio, I've done all my homework. I've written the song, I've worked out all the kinks, I've rehearsed it, I've figured out exactly how I want to record it. But I'll leave I'll be planned 80%, and then 20% is up for grabs for the magic that can happen. So I go into the studio with a plan in mind, and then I allow the magic to happen.
Great answer. Yeah, like it's always great coming prepared for a studio session because using the studio costs time and money.
Exactly. Hey, you know what's up.
Oh, for sure. I read a lot of interviews with the musicians.
Okay.
All right, question 10. What is your favorite memory singing live, as in a concert performance that you remember fondly?
Oh wow. You mean of me performing or watching somebody else perform?
Of you performing.
Oh gosh. Well, all right. Only because I just performed last night and that's extremely vivid in my mind. But I performed at Joe's Pub last night, and that is I hate to say it because I've performed at some really wonderful venues around the world, but it's my favorite venue to perform at, certainly in New York and possibly in the world. It's small, it's intimate. You feel like even the person who's all the way in the back, it's a small enough club that you feel still a connection with them, and that as a performer, I think is priceless. You don't want to be performing in a blank, where you can't see people. I like to be able to connect with people. I like both. I like to sort of not know who's out there, but I also like to once in a while like recognize like, oh, there's so and so, or wow, this person really seems to be feeling this song, and that connection is really dear to me. Plus, the sound there is just crazy great, like really, really good. So as a performer, listen, you could do the best that you possibly can and be in great condition, but if the sound sucks, then there's nothing that can help that. So I'm at the mercy of the sound man as well as the venue, their acoustics. That place is tops. So yeah. And New York audience, I mean, they they're warm and embracing, and they're vocal, and they're real, and I love that.
Great answer. And I could relate to the whole venue story because people are there to have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question 11. Your favorite song that you made?
Oh God. See, that's like, who's your favorite child? You're too young to have children. I'm telling you, you can't I cannot choose. I really can't. It's that, yeah, I cannot. Sorry, that's not going to happen.
Fair enough. Question 12. Favorite Japan nightclub?
Favorite Japan nightclub. I would have to say it's The Room. It was started by the guys from Kyoto Jazz Massive. It was Mondo Grosso's home ground. All of the people who were involved in acid jazz, myself included, hung there. So at any given night, you can go in and you're going to run into a buddy. You're going to know the DJ, and the music is going to be right. It's going to be good. There's other places that were great. The Cave was really interesting back in the day, like that was the late 80s. Gold was sort of interesting back in his day. That was like a multi-floored club. So every floor had different genre of music. So you could catch a bunch of different really good DJs. That was always fun. But yeah, I would say The Room, tiny, tiny place in the basement. But I think that's what made it sort of special.
Amazing answer. Yeah, I've been getting into the whole Kyoto Jazz collective and
Oh,
a
good.
lot of amazing music from that camp.
Absolutely.
All right, question 13. Your most memorable studio session.
My most, wow, again, that's a hard one. There's been a lot. I'll touch on a few that immediately spring to mind. Probably having my father, not the one who raised me, Lou Tabakin, but my birth father, which is Charlie Mariano, great alto sax player, in the studio, and hearing him blow over one of my tunes. That was in London. That was probably one of the most memorable. My parents, meaning my mother, my stepfather, and a jazz rhythm section, recording one of the first songs I ever wrote that my mother, did an arrangement of, and me singing over that, and just the thrill of, wow, this is like happening, and I'm entering into the professional world for real now. That was sort of great. I don't know, Basement Jacks. And being in the studio with them, they had this home studio that, I went into this little cubicle of a vocal space, and it's like, what do I do? Whatever you feel. Okay. That impromptu-ness was a lot of fun. Yeah, just gosh, so many. Louis Vega, little Louis Vega, in his studio, recording flute of all things, for Harlem River Drive. That was like, I rarely get hired as a flute player, so that was sort of fun and interesting. It's just so many great memories, really.
Great answer. And I bet you had a lot of amazing stories working with M Flow. if
Oh
you
yeah.
remember that.
Yeah. Well, M-Flow and I didn't work in the studio together. They were based in Japan. I was based in New York. And so we just communicated through emails, actually, believe it or not. And they sent me the track, they sent me the inspiration. I sent them like in a day some melody and lyric ideas. They came back with some, how about we change this and this? Fine. And then it was like, and then I recorded and sent it to them and they liked it. It was pretty simple actually. And it was good. The things that they changed were it didn't seem like a lot, but it changed the whole tone and scope of the song. And I appreciated their inputs and their production skills and their knowledge of what was gonna, make it bang. And that was good. I like working with people like that.
Great answer and stories. Question 14, your favorite song to perform live?
Oh gosh. Well, it changes all the time. But right now, there are two that I love to perform live. One is Seize the Day. This one never got recorded with a band, which is probably why I love recording it so much. I mean, not recording, performing it so much. I only recorded it as a duet with guitar. So when I get the whole like color of the band, and it's got a lot of twists and turns in terms of rhythmic plays and I like the message that I'm sending out and we really get to like crunch into there. There's a lot of dynamics. All of that is a lot of fun to do, and the band always does a stellar job and just gets in there. It's a lot of fun to do and a lot of fun I think for people to hear as well. And then the other one is Ringo Oiwake, which is not a song that I wrote. It's a very famous folk song from Japan. And a lot of people have covered it. I did my version, and I always have a koto player come and play with us. And I'm really lucky to play with two amazing koto players. One is Sumie Kaneko, and the other is Asuka. And the two just, man, the energy they bring in, and just, it's almost like there's a spirit that definitely falls into us, which is really great. Yeah, so those two are my favorite right now.
Um, great answers. All right. Question 15. The reason why I contacted you in the first place and wanted to do this interview. The creation of your hit song You Make Me.
So what do you want me to know? What do you want to know?
Like everything. How did it come together and what was the recording process like?
So that was off of my album Double Image. When I recorded that album, that song wasn't on there. I hadn't even written it yet. As with most of my songs, I'll write like a line, a lyrical line, or I'll write a bass line, or I'll write the beginning of a song idea, and I don't develop it. It's like when I'm ready to record, that's when I develop it, right? So that was like an idea I had, but it wasn't even in the album. Then when I heard the album all the way through, I was like, wow, we don't have a single. Like there were some good songs in there, but none that I saw clearly as a single. So then we had used up all of the budget for the recording, but I told the record company, I said, listen, I don't hear a single and I think I have an idea for a song and I want to record it. And they're like, okay, well, you're welcome to on your own dime. And I'm like, well, if I want this album to hit, I got to do this. So I enlisted my then writing partner, and he helped me so much with my productions, Shinichi Osawa, who's the head of Mondo Grosso. And I said, listen, I've got an idea for this song. So I basically wrote the whole thing. I said, this is it. What do you think? And he goes, all right, let me work on it. So he did the production. He's a fantastic programmer and his beats are always so on. So we always back then used to just do the basic production with the beats and whatever program we could do on our own at our home studio. And by home studio, it was just like, yeah, the MPC, the keyboard, that's it, right? And then when we went into the studio with Dave Darlington, we laid down all the tracks and we're like, do you have a bass player? So he brought in Gene Perez, who played that killer, bass line. And the horns were taken. I think in Japan, we had this one guy who used to always do the horn arrangements. And then once it was recorded, it was like, this is it. This is the hit. And sure enough, that became the hit, like I had a pretty good pulse of what was going on, not just popular, but also in the clubs. And that tied in really well, both on radio as well as in the clubs.
Great, great, amazing story. And yeah, this is a classic case of album is done and we don't have a hit, or I have an idea for a hit, because this has happened a lot in the music industry where someone is confident that their album is done, but they always feel like something is missing. So they gotta go back to the studio, and then something spontaneous happens, and then they put on the album, and then that last minute song becomes the hit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it wasn't luck. It was definitely, it was, you could just see it, you could hear it. It was like, yeah, it needs that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like I feel like you had a lot of fun making the music video.
That was a lot of fun. Taji Max was the director and I guess video director. And he comes from a fashion background. Like his wife is a really renowned stylist, and he just has a really great eye for style. So he wanted to, do something with me that was extremely stylish, and, he thinned me out so I looked more like a model, which was crazy. And I mean, all of those moves, I just had to pretend I was a model, because that's not in my scope of who I am. I'm very down to earth and just like, this is how I am. But I had to do the whole like, like camp thing and just,
Yeah.
but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. We laughed a lot.
Hey, yeah, and yeah, I know what it makes you want to do. It makes you want to do the prep, the Roger Rabbit, the Carlton, and
Okay.
most certainly the Running Man.
Okay, good.
All right. Question 16. What was your reaction to the song being included on the hit video game Dance Dance Revolution and Beat Mania?
So I'm really embarrassed to admit this. I particularly then wasn't into video games at all. Like it's just a whole world to me that has nothing to do with my reality. So the record company or the publishing company had said, they want to use this. Is it okay? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So it was sort of, I hate to say it, but a whatever. Then later on, people came to me like, oh my God, we love your song. I'm like, oh, cool. And then they say, yeah, we heard it from this video game. I'm like, oh, right. Okay. So I didn't realize it was such a big hit through that. It's sort of, yeah, no, it's great. I'm very happy.
Yeah, that's how I first heard it. Then years later, I listened to your discography and heard the full version. All right, question 17. How do you feel about having a song that still resonates with jazz and the Dance Dance Revolution community till this day?
Um, I'm honored. I really am. There were times that I felt a little bit like I was cornered into one thing, like being a dance musician or a jazz musician or soul singer, whatever, And I've always been about breaking boundaries, breaking borders, or crossing borders, or joining borders, however you want to say it. And if I could be a conduit to be able to introduce different types of genres and music forms to people, then that's great. That's a great honor to be in that place.
Amazing answer. Question 18. What inspired you to move from Japan to New York?
Love and a child. I had gotten married. He was based in New York, so I moved back for that. And my parents lived here. They've been here for a long time. It was time.
Uh, um, but yeah, like I would love to take a vacation in Japan as soon as I retire from my job at 55 because it always looks like a blast. I'm looking at the videos and stuff. It will look like my place to spend a week at.
Yeah, well, you should go while the yen is as weak it is right now.
Oh,
Seriously, the dollar will stretch far more.
oh, for sure. Question 19. Would you be willing to be a part of a Bimani and Dance Mania tour performing your hit song You Make Me? Because it's still a popular song in a Beat Mania and a fan favorite.
Um, I don't know about that. You know, I'm 60 years old, and when I wrote that, I was still in my early 30s, and dancing and being vigorously involved in the dance community was huge for me. But I've sort of moved away from that. You know, the music I do now is much more mature, let's just say. So it would feel in ingenuous. Is that the right word? It wouldn't feel like authentic me right now to do that. Like I would feel a little like I'm copying myself from the past, if that makes any sense. I would love it though if a singer would cover the song. That would honor me greatly, who could like nail it way better than I could.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, that's great answer because there are too many people that don't want to admit that they're past their prime and are still clinging on to their heyday.
Yeah, right. There you go. Yeah.
All right, last question. Question 20. Your favorite dance move?
Oh God, my favorite dance move. Hmm. I don't know. Do I have a favorite dance move?
Well, well, I have a couple. Mine are the Carlton,
What is this? What is this? A snake?
the snake,
That might
my
be my favorite.
and and Michael Jackson.
No, I don't do Michael Jackson. Woo! I want to sing like Michael Jackson.
Thanks. It was amazing meeting and talking to you. Thanks for this wonderful interview, and I will now deport you in Japanese. Arigato gozaimasu. Jara.
John, bye bye.